Let's have a look what is happening in Birmingham tonight.
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well because...
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
But I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Katie, I think Becky...
I've got to say, because I feel very sad about this whole thing, because people took to the streets initially with legitimate concerns. So many people would say that their concerns have been ignored for way too long. I think a lot of those concerns are very, very valid. The problem that you've got now is that now this has all been overtaken because the most horrendous violence that you keep referencing.
What was the one on what were the legitimate concerns that people took to the street on and started the violence on Tuesday in Southport and attacked the mosque? What were the legitimate concerns there?
Well, they would say that they're taking to the... And I'm not a spokesperson for the people that are taking to the streets, but I do know, I listen to people every single day, so I'm listening to what people are saying, that actually what happened in Southport was the light, if you like, that flipped it all off, and people would say that grievances had been caused and festering for a very long time.
Why would a mosque be attacked after a horrific
I shall answer that, actually. Many, many rumours were going around, which I have to be clear turned out to be untrue, but from what I've seen and from what I've heard and from what I've understood by talking to people, there was an arrest made whilst that vigil was happening. Footage of that arrest went absolutely viral on social media. It's been, you might have even seen it yourself. It was spread far and wide, and that was reported.
The BNP.
And that was and that was reported to be a Muslim. So for those people on the ground, they were receiving reports that this is what had happened, that this Muslim had this knife and so on and so forth. It wasn't true. That was not true, and I think everybody needs to understand that was not true.
Of course that wasn't true, but it was not as spontaneous as that. It was not as spontaneous as that. I've spoken to people who were in Southport at the time. There were people coming in from outside Southport, racist, far-right activists from out of town who came in prior to the vigil, and then when there was very little policing, called in for more, and then set rampage and attacked the mosque.
Well,
This was not a spontaneous mistake. It was also egged on by figures in our politics and our media. Often those are the same people spreading these. There are questions to answer about who this person was, etc., which leads to anti-Muslim violence that we saw on our streets. This was not a spontaneous result of misguided policies about multiculturalism or whatever else.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I respect your view. I have a very different view. I think for lots of people who have watched these protests, or even some of the people who have participated in them, I mean, clearly there is a distinction between what happened in Southport and the underlying concerns in the country. For many people, you know, I remember when Keir Starmer, I think yesterday, said, people have a right to feel safe in this country. Everybody agrees with that. But a lot of British people would say, well, we have a right to feel safe in our country too. And if you're not controlling the borders, if you're allowing 130,000 people into the country illegally and we don't know who they are, if you are presiding over demographic changes that we've never had in the history of our country, while also not really integrating people who are coming into the country, if you're letting more criminals onto the streets, releasing them out of prisons, if you're refusing to have a serious, mature, grown-up conversation about issues that have been very evident in these towns for many years, towns like Telford and Rotherham and Rochdale, and you've been called a racist by pointing to the very visible examples of multiculturalism breaking down, and I'm talking about the sexual exploitation of young white girls, then you don't feel safe in this country. And you do feel like there are no-go areas. And I think this incident, yes, there was an element of organisation. And there are far-right activists on the streets causing mayhem. And as I've said repeatedly, if you break the law, you should be arrested, you should be chucked into prison. But let's stop kidding ourselves. This is about the borders. This is about a lack of control. The best thing Keir Starmer and the Labour movement can do right now, if it's serious about governing this country, is regain control of the borders and slow immigration. Those are two things Keir Starmer should be doing right now. If he does that, I suspect these riots and protests will dissipate and Labour could go on to have a successful period in government. But if we're going to sit here pretending that this is actually about the far right rather than this groundswell of opposition on issues where, to be frank, the British people have been lied to and misled, I think this is going to escalate. And that's what I'm worried about. I don't really want this to escalate.